This is the demo for Logicity Automatic Invoicing, and that's a product that bolts onto Visual Enterprise, and it automates the process of creating digital, either email-based invoice deliveries out to your customers or having them automatically printed, basically automating all of these steps that you might do to, after an invoice has been generated, to actually get it in the hands of your customer. It works a lot like your standard visual is going to work. You're going to start off by entering your custom orders just like you normally do now. I'm going to go ahead and walk one all the way through here. Yeah, I'm just going to use our good old send grow customer, and I'll pick a part here, and I'll save that. You'll continue to ship these orders just like you do right now. And ship the full quantity. And you'll continue to use this invoice forms under the sales menu, just like you do now, mainly because this is what is going to create the AR invoice. We need them to be in the AR invoice table before we can actually see them. And typically, you're probably going to want to check this suppress print, because you might not actually want to print the built-in Centura forms, although I have had some customers who would use this product and they would still print them here. That way they can actually review them before they deliver them out. But I'm going to go ahead and just suppress, and I'm going to pick that pack list that I just processed. Okay, so I've got this new invoice, 6065, and I could verify that it was in invoice entry by going to invoice entry here and loading that thing up. So we're not going to change any of that. This is all still going to work, and you're also probably going to enter, continue to enter invoices by hand right in invoice entry for miscellaneous invoices or whatever else you might have going on. But this is where typically right now what you would have to do is take and possibly print this invoice off and maybe make it into a PDF, find out what the email address for this customer is, open up Outlook, create a new email attachment, or maybe this customer prefers to have things printed to them, so you would know you'd have to print it off, go to the printer, grab it, stuff it in an envelope. So if you're processing a large volume of invoices, that could be a very tedious process to go through and do that. So that's where Logicity Automatic Invoicing steps in. And the program itself, it can either be run from within the menu structure here. If you want to add a menu entry for it, you can certainly add it right in Visual. Most people tend to prefer to run it off the Start menu, where you don't necessarily have to be logged into Visual to use it. So there'll be a new program called Logicity Automatic Invoicing under your Infor Global Solutions group. And when you load it up, this is what the screen's going to look like. There's a whole lot of settings that drive some of the behavior here, but I'm going to walk through just with a sample of how this might operate. So when it came in and it auto-checked several of these rows here. Now each of these rows represents a single customer that has one or more unprocessed invoices that Logicity hasn't processed. Now the way we keep track of whether it's been processed or not is a custom table that we install into your database. So this doesn't necessarily mean that you printed it out of the receivable screen or anything like that. This is just whether we've processed it here or not, and that gives a lot of flexibility that you're going to see a little bit later on. So we've checked each of them here for each of these customers, and you can see the column tallying up how many unprocessed invoices they have. You also know the customer ID, the customer name. We have a column for what their terms are. And then lastly, what their email address is. So what you take away from the ones that were checked here, the ones we've automatically checked are the ones that we have email addresses on file for. And what the idea here is you'd come in and these would all be checked. You'd have email invoices, all those would drop off, and all that would be left would be the ones that didn't have an email address on file. Then you'd print those, then those would drop off, and then your list would be cleared out. That's kind of what the workflow is supposed to be. The email address where we get those from is under customer maintenance. And let's pull up that send grow customer. Within there, you've got a alternate contacts under the maintain menu, and you can have as many different alternate contacts you like in here. And you can associate an email address with those alternate contacts. So I have two of them here, two different email addresses. And the next thing under Maintain, there's another section called Email Documents. So we've purposed this screen for our own uses here, where you'll see each contact listed on this grid here, and there's a checkbox for customer invoice. So for anybody that's checked for that, we know that you need the invoice to go to them. As you can see, some of these we have multiple email addresses. So for this ABL man, there are 2 different email addresses that it's going to. You can have as many of them checked as you want, and the invoices will be delivered to those. You should also note there's a customer statements column here. We're going to go review. We'll be using that a little bit later on. So just taking note that this is another place where we're marking what sort of documents we get delivered to this particular contact. So if we have a contact with an email address on file, we fill it in here, and we've auto-checked them. And I don't want to email all of these right now, so I'm going to use this little tool up here, which can be used to mass select and deselect the checkboxes here. You can also check them individually, but you can see when you pick this, you can easily select with email address, without email address, or all. So SendGrow, this is the one we just did, that shipment we just processed. So I'm just going to process this one, just because it'll be a real quick, simple one. So I'd come in here and I'd do the email invoices. And if you had a bunch of them checked, what you'd see is it would go into this mode, and as each one is pending, it would say complete, 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 and then when they're all done, they just drop off. So you won't see SendGrow on here anymore. And I just got an email of what got delivered. You can see we got a from address, we've got a subject. I'll show you where both of those come through, where you go set all this stuff up later, and a body, and then attached, I've got a digital version of an invoice here. Now this invoice you're looking at is the one that we actually include with the software. It's a standard crystal report. Let me actually show you what it looks like, just so you can get a feel for it. So this is the report. We've already joined in several tables. This is just a standard ODBC report, so you can take this and really modify it as you see fit. We've left a little place up here for you to drop your logo in. You'll almost certainly want to do that. But the report just has a single parameter for invoice ID. So if you know what invoice you want to print, you just paste that in, and that's all there is to it. So we include this, and you can modify this, or you can engage us for custom services to modify this for you if you don't own a copy of Crystal or don't feel comfortable doing that. All right, so that's with that version. Now let's do a print as an example here. I'm going to just select this one, and I'll do the print invoices. And you see this operates very similar. It just runs, and within a moment it's going to come up. Now I've got this printer redirected as a PDF printer here, and I'll explain what that message was a little bit later. But the PDF printer here, that's where you can actually see what came out of it, and you'll see it looks pretty much the same as the one that would have been emailed, just coming out on the paper, presumably. A few other features we have on here. We've got some filtering up here where you can filter by customer ID or customer name. And this just filters the list in real time here, so you can very easily locate entries, and it also searches the entire field. So all of these have the letter ST in them, that's why they're showing that. We also have this add and remove invoices buttons. So you're going to have things that might show up in this queue here that you know you just don't want to process. Maybe this one here, I know this is for my company, so I don't, it's some sort of internal deal, so I don't need to have anything emailed or printed. I might just select that and hit remove, and that just marks it in the table that we don't need to worry about those invoices. That drops those out. Add-on invoices would be the opposite of that, where you can come in here and maybe you need to resend an invoice. Customer said they didn't get it, you want to resend it. This interface allows you to search for any invoices that would have occurred in the past. You can sort by date range, invoice ID range, or customer ID, or you can just leave it wide open and see all of them. And you can add back in any entries that you need to add back in. And I'll show right back up on the list there. We also have an account summary. So if you go to the Process Account Summary button here, this screen works very similar to the other screen where it auto-checks everybody has an email address on file first, and that way the idea is you can process your email account summaries for all of them, then select everybody else, and then do the printed ones. If you were to output one of these, how to select a single one, I was doing email, you'll see like the other where it says pending. The only difference with this one is that they don't drop off because you could regenerate an account summary every single day if you wanted to. So we just let you know that it's been completed here. And I got my message with the account summary. And you can see this is yet another sample report that we include with the software that you can modify as you need in Crystal reports. Okay, so now we're going to go from a little bit more of the behind-the-scenes stuff to show some of the flexibility of the software. And everything's taken care of under the Settings button here. So to click on that, the first thing you're going to fill in is the database info. Should be pretty straightforward, just where your server is, where your database name is, and how you log into it. Next, you're going to have some information about your email server. So for me, I've got an email server on this IP address, and it's on port 25. And because I don't have authentication required on my internal network here, both those are grayed off. But if I had to log in, I could fill those in, and I could type in my login credentials there. We also have this ability if your email server requires SSL, like you're outputting this to Gmail or really most database servers nowadays, you might have to check that box. You've got a reply address. This is who the emails appear to come from. I've got one of these set up where it's like an obviously fake email address so that nobody tries to reply to it expecting a reply, and they get a bounce back even if they did reply to that. But you might choose to change that where this might be more of a customer service account or a support account or something like that. So you can really make that whatever you like. Same deal with subject, that's your email subject and email body. You can make those whatever you like. We have a control here to say what the maximum number of attachments per email are. If you had somebody like this one that has 11 processed invoices, maybe you don't want to blast them with a email with 11 attachments. You might want to break those up into smaller chunks. You can use that to control that. Next we have the automatically select on startup feature here. So this is going to be, whenever we first came into it, remember how I had pointed out that it auto-checked everybody that had an email address on file. That's just because of the setting here. You can make it do none, with email address, without email address, or all. So that's completely up to you how that works. Next, we've got the path to the Saberlogic Logicity program. As the name might indicate, this program works in conjunction with a piece of software called Logicity, which is a Crystal Reports viewer and automator that we developed, and it's very powerful, and we leverage some of those features to make this program do what it does. So you do need to tell it where that's installed. We do provide 5 licenses of Logicity Pro with every purchase of Logicity Automatic Invoicing. So you'll have sufficient licenses to run this, and you don't have to buy Logicity separately necessarily. If you need to use this program on more than 5 computers, though, you may need to purchase those additional seats. Then we have a checkbox here that says database version equal to or greater than 653. All that this does is if you run a version earlier than 653, you don't have that email documents section like I was showing you earlier on. So we have to pull the email addresses from a different field. So this just dynamically tells the program where to pull this from. And the next thing we have are the Rrd files. And I've got some sample ones set up here, but what I'm actually do just to kind of walk through the procedure of how this all gets set up is we're going to create brand new ones to show you how this works. Each of these Rrd files, that stands for, that is the Logicity solution file format extension. So that's what that actually means. For our purposes here, what we're saying is when I click the email invoices button, what does it do? And it launches this script. If I hit the print, it launches this script. If I'm on the account summary and I do the email, it launches this one. If I hit the print on the account summary, it launches this one. So let's create one of these scripts so you can see how it works. So first off, it's going to tell you where you're putting it at. And I've just got one on my desktop here, and I'm going to overwrite. That's how what I'll do is I'll just put a 1 after it so it creates a new one. So it opens up this program called Logicity Solution Builder. Again, think about this as like a script of taking reports and doing things with them. And each of those reports and things that it does with those reports are an action. So presumably you're going to have at least one of these actions. What it's going to do is it's going to take and email this data out. Now, one of the stipulations with the email action is that we have to create these, the following. So I'm going to walk through and create one here, and hit add action, and for display name, you can really call it whatever you want. We really recommend, this is more for your benefit if you're coming in and editing this thing later on to see what it all does. It's usually nice to make it something kind of obvious. So I'm going to call this email invoice report. Next, on the file name tab, you browse to where your RPT file is at that you want to use. And again, you can use the RPT files we give you, or you can use your own RPT. That's completely up to you. I'm going to select the one that we included. What you're seeing here is this is Logicity. So there's a lot of features in here. I'm not going to explain every single feature on every single screen because a lot of them aren't necessarily relevant to what we're doing right now, but there are a lot of additional things you can tweak. Database info. This is when you run a crystal report like you do now, it probably asks you for a login to your database. So you want to specify that here. And you really just want to tell it the information that it's going to ask you for. So for most visual users, they need to give it a username and password. So I'm going to give it my SysADM username and password. Next we have the parameters. So remember how I pointed out that report earlier that had a single parameter on it for the invoice ID? This is in standard Logicity. You can either make it prompt you for that parameter, or you can specify it. You certainly don't want it to prompt you while you're using this program, so we want to say specified. That reads in the crystal report and it finds out what parameters were in use on that report. So I only have a single one here, but you may have, if you change this report in your own way, you might have multiple parameters. So those will all come up. So you click this and hit add, and it asks you what you want to fill in for that parameter. Now, this could be a static field, or it can be any of the handful of variables that we include with just the automatic invoicing to make it do what it does. So one of the variables, and variables inside Logicity always begin and end with a %. So one of the variables is invoice. What that means is whenever I'm processing one of these, let's say I process this one that has 11 unprocessed invoices, it's going to call this Logicity solution file once per invoice, and it's going to each time replace this variable with whatever the invoice ID was for those 11 invoices. So that's what that does. And next we have the Action tab. Now this is, again, standard Logicity stuff here. You've got a View action, which you almost certainly won't use in this program in automatic invoicing. But email, print, and save, those three you'll very likely make use of. Now you might suspect, since we're creating the logic for the email button, that you'd want to select an email action here. This is the one kind of unusual thing with the way that it works, because what we want to do is send off a single email with all of the invoices attached to it. We actually have to do something kind of special with Logicity here, where we first have them saved out somewhere, then we write an email, and then we attach all those to it. So this is one of those things we kind of send with the documentation. But for your first action on your email print on your email buttons, you need to actually make them save. And when you make them save, then you can pick your format. And a lot of this actually doesn't matter. If I tell my desktop, it's not actually going to leave a file there. It pretty much just generates it quick enough to have it there, write an email, and attach it all to it. So it doesn't really matter what folder you pick, because you probably won't even see them. They'll happen so quick. We do have this suppress if no records checkbox. What this does, this is actually a Logicity feature, and if the crystal report that it's trying to run doesn't return any data for what you passed into it, this determines whether or not it actually outputs or not. So this will actually come more into play with a customer statement, where if I have a customer and I tell it, okay, give me a customer statement for this customer, and they literally owe you nothing, they have nothing due to you, that might return 0 records. And in that situation, you might not want to email them a customer statement. You might want to just hold off on it. So the default is to suppress it in that situation, but you might want to change that behavior. You may want to send them a report even if it has no records. So that's in your control here. And then you can also use logging here to log as this occurs. Okay, so I'm going to actually leave this email on pretty much how it is, but one other thing to take note of here is that we can also add as many additional actions for other crystal reports in here as we like. Actually, I'll take that back. I think I am going to add one extra action to this because I have had somebody ask about this before. Let's say for your customers that you also want to email them a customer statement along with their invoice. You can add an additional action in here. Let's and we could send them we could also send them their account summary here. Now, typically this would be one where you might want to consider what you're doing here, because the account summary screen, we know what email on the email documents which users have been checked there. We've got potentially a different set of email addresses on this screen. Just to show you that, looking back at our send row here, under my email documents, I may have this user is supposed to get customer statements and this user is not supposed to get them. In that situation, if I was back in Logicity automatic invoicing, we can't pull it up because we can't windows on top of each other, I would potentially be sending it to the wrong person from this screen here. So you do need to be careful, I guess, what you're working with there. But if I was confident with it, I could say prompt for the customer here. Underscore ID is another variable we have. And I could say to email this. And from here, I can actually tell it all that same information, and I can manually specify email addresses here. So again, it's just this may or may not be a great example. Another example you might have would be if you wanted to do maybe an internal cost analysis or something like that. So each time an invoice is processed, you want to also email an internal group showing a breakdown of how that job did. You could also maybe create an email action here. So I'm going to actually do that. I'm going to just add myself. And let's say I'm going to send this to myself in Excel for some reason. So we've basically changed the mapping behind the email button now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just do it. Actually, I'm going to do just a single email invoice for us send grow here. That last one we were working at earlier on. And I'm going to click the email invoices button. So what's going to happen is the invoice is going to email to me, but then I'm also going to have that customer statement emailed to me as well. So it's I'm actually getting multiple things here at once. I'll wait for that to come in. So we've got first to have the account summary that got sent to me, and you can see what it did. It basically took the account summary and it put it inside Excel format. And then here's the invoice, just like before. So I guess what the takeaway here is that behind these buttons, you can make it email or really do lots of different actions. You just add as many as you want in here, and they don't have to go to the same people, so it's just really up to you. Print invoices, I've actually got a little bit of that going on here. If I go to my print invoices, you can see how this one works is I've got a print invoices action, which is the first one, which runs my invoice report. So I've specified the parameters like before. And for my action, I've got it set to print, and I told it to go to my PDF creator printer here. It's giving me a list of all my printers, and I know to go to PDF creator. But then I created a second action in here called also save a copy. Now the also save a copy, what it does is it runs the exact same report, credentials, same parameters, but for the action here, I've got it set to save, and I can tell what format I want it in. And I've done some kind of different stuff here. For the destination directory, I've told it to run on my desktop here, and I actually told it to put it in a subfolder based off of the customer ID. And this was earlier, I actually got an error message to tell me the folder wasn't available. That's because I tried to create one for where I didn't have the customer's folder set up in here. And I've got it set with the invoice ID using the invoice ID as a variable in there. So if we were to look at going back to back in Saberlogic from here. So if I was to take this and just make sure there's nothing in the folder, so you can see before and after. So if I hit print invoices on this, you can actually see two things happen. First off, I'm going to get my PDF creator come up because it's trying to print it. You know, typically you'd actually have this physically going out to a printer. So I'll come in and I'm just going to tell it wait on this. And then behind the scenes, under my subfolder here, it actually created PDFs of both of those invoices, and it actually put the invoice number as part of the file name. That's just because we have that variables in it. That's the only reason why it did that. So this might be kind of idea if you maybe have like an intranet or something where your vendors might be able to, or your customers might be able to go in and see their invoices, like a SharePoint or something like that. You could actually dump these out to a web server and maybe have all their invoices filed out there in a subfolder for them. All right, then the other ones we had is for the email account summary. This is the exact same idea as before. It's a save action as opposed to an email action just because we need to aggregate them into a single folder. And then the account summary for the print, I just have a single printing on that. But again, you can have as many actions on any of these as you like, and it would just continue to process all of them. All right, so that's Logicity Automatic Invoicing.